Welcome back to Art Practice ASMR. Now that Evangelion has been on Netflix for a couple weeks, I'm sure most of you have finished it and are now looking for something to watch in its place. So here are 3 anime that I recommend you watch after watching Evangelion. The first on this list is an anime called Fooly Cooly, or FLCL. Fooly Cooly is an anime about a boy named Naota, whose ordinary life becomes extraordinary after a woman named Haruko hits him with her Vespa. After that, robots and other crazy things start coming from the portal in his forehead. And honestly, that's all I can really tell you about Fooly Cooly, because this is an anime that's really going to be not what you expect, no matter what your expectations are. This show is really recommended for people who like the crazy cosmic aspects of Evangelion, and people who like trying to figure out the mystery as it was presented. But don't be mistaken, Fooly Cooly is way less straightforward than Evangelion was. This show is a crazy, crazy ride that is never really explained until the last 2 episodes. So really just need to experience it as it goes and soak in all of the really cool visuals. And then in the last 2 episodes, everything will be tied up in a neat bow. If you didn't like those crazy aspects of Evangelion, don't worry, because this show may also be for you. The director of Fooly Cooly has said that this show is made for people who felt like Evangelion was a little too smart for them. He said that he wanted to make a show that was stupid and it was okay to be stupid. And really, I totally get that vibe from Fooly Cooly. It's very stupid but smart about the ways it is stupid. If you want it to be a show where you can just watch it for fun, then it is that. But if you want it to be a show where you can overanalyze everything, it's totally that too. This show is so many things, but it's also wholly unique and not like anything you've ever seen before. And yeah, that's my very simple summary of what Fooly Cooly is about. I'm going to be honest, I'm recording this on a completely different night than I recorded the previous statement. So, I'm going to have to regain my train of thought. But I think I know what I have to say. Also, don't mind the thunder sounds in the background. It's raining right now. So Fooly Cooly is an anime that is very enjoyable if you do like to read into things. It can be watched as something that's just mindless humor, but there is still a ton of stuff you can gain from looking into different things. I just stuttered, it was weird. Anyway, this show has a ton of metaphors for coming of age and puberty and what it means to be mature. And I really enjoyed all of that. But I do think that I would have enjoyed a lot of that even more if I was in middle school and high school. I do think that a lot of members of my YouTube audience are in that age range. I'm pretty sure. So this show could be very influential to any of you who fit that description. This show also has a ton to be admired from in the animation department. While I can't name any specific animators who worked on this show, there was a ton of beautiful and amazing things in this. The show has a ton of traditional animation and beautiful Sakuga fight scenes. But the show also has some of the coolest CG usage I've ever seen in a TV anime. Which is even more impressive because this show came out in the 2000s, the early 2000s. There is a really cool Matrix-style 360 bullet time revolution thing of the Vespa crash that I mentioned earlier. And at first I didn't realize that it was full CG, but on consecutive rewatches of that scene, I flubbed again, I noticed certain CG artifacts in certain areas, but I think if you stream it in standard def, you probably won't even notice, but if you splurge to buy the HD Blu-ray, you'll probably totally notice, but it's still pretty seamless. There's also a ton of mixed media animation, which I absolutely love. If you don't know what that means, think of the cartoon The Amazing World of Gumball, where there's a ton of different styles coming together. This show does that, but it's mostly in 2D stuff, except for that 3D thing that I mentioned just now. They have scenes that are just manga panels, where there's no animation, and they even joke about fans saying that it's lazy. There are scenes where it's completely animated like South Park, which I thought was hilarious. Then there were scenes that were done in pixel art because they were replicating a video game. There are also a ton of 90s references in this show, stuff like Walkman, music, the Game Boy. But then there's a ton of references to classic anime that influenced the people making this. There's stuff like Evangelion references, which is a show that came out a few years earlier. They reference people who overanalyze Evangelion, and they kind of poke a little fun at them, which I thought was pretty funny. Then there's a sequence at the beginning of one of the episodes where they reference Lupin III, that whole franchise. I'm not particularly familiar with it, but they reference the show, and they reference Monkey Punch Sensei, who I think passed away recently. But there were a lot of very loving references to a ton of different franchises and media. And I really appreciated that. It added so many different layers to this show. And then there's the show itself. I didn't really know how to segue into this. The show wasn't really what I expected, and after watching the first episode, I wondered if I should stick with this show. And I actually ended up watching all of the episodes in the same night, which was not what I expected. I expected this to be a series that I would watch over the course of a few days. But these 6 episodes really feel like it's just 30 minutes altogether, even though each episode is 25 minutes on their own. And so I was very surprised, but I think it was absolutely worth it. I don't think this show became one of my favorites like Evangelion did. But this show is absolutely worth watching. Whether you liked or didn't like Evangelion, I think you will like this. Speaking of things I like, I actually really like this drawing I've made. This could have been one of the longest drawings it took for me to record. It was probably over 50 minutes that I spent on this, but my camera actually ended up dying after 43 minutes. Here's the finished piece at the end, and I actually really, really like it. I hope you like it too. Now, here is a show on this recommendation list that I don't actually recommend. Or at least I don't think this show is good, and I recommend that you watch it to figure out if you personally find this show is good. This anime is called Razafan, and when I first heard about this show, I had heard that it was Evangelion, but better. And you can imagine how excited I was at this, because I absolutely love Evangelion. The story about the show is that it was created in the 2000s by using scripts from Evangelion that they updated with things that fans wanted to see from the original show. So instead of having Shinji be antisocial and whiny, or unlikable as people thought, they changed Shinji into a character named Ayato, who was supposed to be very take charge and everything. Then they kind of changed the confusing aspects. They were supposed to make the show more understandable so that anyone could watch it and enjoy it. And I was like, that is a very interesting idea. I think I may like this, so I gave it a chance. I had also seen a little animated segment from it, and I was like, that was pretty interesting. I think I'm going to enjoy this. I rewatched Evangelion a couple weeks ago, and I decided that just after doing that would be the perfect time to watch Razafan, because I would be able to mentally compare the two. But I also wanted to be very conscious that I wouldn't have high hopes for this show, because I've done that before, but eventually I'm always able to just enjoy the show for what it is after a little bit of initial disappointment. But for Razafan, after the first episode, I clearly understood that I absolutely hated this show. And it's not because of anything that was my fault. It's not because I expected too much from the show. It's just because Razafan is straight up horrible. Razafan is a show that takes way too many cues from Evangelion, but it feels like the people creating the show didn't understand what made Evangelion good. There are episodes that are clearly mirrors of things that happen in the show, and it just makes me want to rewatch Evangelion again, because this show was trash. There were some times that I sort of enjoyed things that happened, but they were just small nuggets in a basket of trash. What a great analogy. The main character, Ayato, is not Shinji if he was a Chad. He's really Shinji if Shinji had no clear character traits. I mean, I'll get into that later, actually. There's two characters who could conceivably be Asuka. There's one with her tragic backstory, and then there's one who's just a tsundere. Then there's a character who's clearly supposed to be Misato, because she has purple hair and she wears a red jacket. And that's it. Oh, also she falls in love with the main character even though he's a child. But it's way creepier than Evangelion. Anyway, a lot of people have said that this show is supposed to be something that you're supposed to enjoy by turning your brain off. And unlike Digibro, I actually can find enjoyment in doing that. I don't think I would have enjoyed Infinite Stratos if I just left my brain on and overanalyzed everything. But this is not a show that you can do that to. This is a show where the writers clearly want you to try to figure out what's going on. They just don't give you enough to even do that. I dropped this show after 13 episodes because I just didn't understand what was going on. And not because I was confused at how brilliant this show was. I was just confused because they didn't tell me anything about what was happening. To make that very apparent, let's compare the first episode of Razafan to the first episode of Eva. In the first episode of Eva, you learn about Shinji. You learn that he's antisocial and socially awkward. You learn about his relationship with his father. You learn that he's in Tokyo 3 to meet his father and visit him at his company. You meet Misato, you find out that she's a klutz, you find out that she takes pity on Shinji because they have similar father issues. You meet Ritsuko, who is fairly clearly the professional. She's the only one who knows what's going on. And then you meet Gendo, who is Shinji's father, and he only brought Shinji there because he was useful to him now, and that he clearly does not love Shinji in any traditional sense. You find out that Shinji is there to pilot the Eva, which is a giant robot that fights these angels, which are giant monsters. And you find out that Shinji doesn't want to do this, but ends up doing it to protect another pilot. Now compare this to Razafan, where you learn that the main character, Ayato, likes to paint. You learn that his mother is never home. You learn that he has 2 friends who are probably dating. You learn that he has a 3rd friend that sometimes only he can see, and other times other people can see her. It's not very clear about why that is. He meets this woman who says, "Do you want to find out why people have blue blood?" And he chooses not to find out. He hops on a train, and in the subway he finds a room with a giant egg in it. And his imaginary girlfriend sings, and a robot comes out of the egg. Ayato passes out and says the robot's name, which for some reason he knows. And then he finds himself inside the robot. He flies up into the air, and then the episode ended. Nothing particularly clear happened there. And even after 2 episodes, I didn't really understand what was going on. It wasn't until the 3rd episode, where they had an exposition dump in the form of text at the beginning of the episode, that I actually knew what was going on. And at that point, I did think that the 3rd episode would be better, and that I would enjoy the rest of the series. And while I did sort of enjoy the 3rd episode, there was nothing that I really enjoyed in any of the other episodes. There were some small moments that I thought were fine, but overall, I personally thought this show was absolute trash and not worth watching at all. I'm absolutely surprised that this show has over a 7 out of 10 rating on my anime list. It has like a 7 point whatever. Anyway, watch Razafan if you want to. There's a ton more things I hate about it that I could just dedicate an entire video to. But maybe you'll enjoy it. It has been described as Evangelion for people who don't like Eva, so give it a chance if you want to. But I didn't like it. Now this final anime is one that I would personally describe as Evangelion for people who didn't like Evangelion. And this one I actually do recommend, but I'll get to all of this later. This show is called Dual Parallel: Trouble Adventures. It's about a boy who can see into a parallel dimension, and one day he is sent there. He finds out that he never existed in this dimension, but he is captured by a Japanese army. He learns that he is one of the few people who can pilot these giant robots. Not only that, but he is the only man who can do it. He basically begins a romance with his high school crush's counterpart, who is kind of like their version of Asuka, but she's way more friendly. There's also a Rei-style character who is going to be added to his harem, probably. I'm only like 5 episodes into this show because I took way too long watching Razafan. Anyway, as I said, I'm 5 episodes in, and honestly, I absolutely love this show. This show captures so much of what I loved about Evangelion, but it's very low stakes and enjoyable for people who felt stressed by Eva. This show isn't as intense as Eva. This show isn't a psychological drama, it's actually a romantic comedy harem show. But it doesn't fall into all of those predictable tropes that other things do. Also, this show is somehow connected to Tenchi Muyo, but I have no clue. Anyway, I'm only 5 episodes into this show, but we've just had our first major battle. And it surprised me on how well this show balances comedy and drama. And this battle was very dramatic and intense, and at times psychological. Very reminiscent of Evangelion. After this battle ended, though, it introduced something that I absolutely loved about this show, which is, if anyone feels in the battle that they're going to die, all they have to do is quit, and the battle ends. This introduces a huge element of the whole main conflict of this show. The main conflict is between 2 opposing armies. There's the Japanese army, and then there's the Ra-Ra army, I think. Like I said, I'm only 5 episodes in. But there's these 2 armies who are fighting each other. The Japanese army is very traditional good guys with EVA-style mechs and stuff. The Ra-Ra army have the crazy monster mechs, and the main woman in this army wears a cool, crazy villain rose outfit, and it's very reminiscent of a Saturday morning cartoon or anime that I would have seen when I was younger. Honestly, this show has that vibe to it, a very chill Saturday morning cartoon vibe. But they introduce this aspect that if you feel like you're going to die in a battle, all you have to do is quit, and then the opposing side, or whichever side was dominating, wins the battlefield, and the side that forfeit has to withdraw. And I thought that was pretty genius, a pretty genius way to keep the light tone of the show, but also introduce some sort of stakes. And I'm hoping that people who didn't like Evangelion will come to this video, they'll hear about this show, and they'll think, I might be able to enjoy this, and they'll give it a chance. And maybe not even people who didn't like Evangelion. I think people who felt overwhelmed by how accurately Evangelion portrayed the mental illness aspects and how intense and draining the show got. I hope that people who felt that way about that show will watch Dual Parallel and they'll think, this is such a nice smooth ride. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't think of what that ending to that sentence would be until I got to the ending, and I just had nothing. Anyway, I think that's all I have to say for this video. It's coming to an end soon. I will say that I'll have another video like this coming out in 2 weeks. Next week, I have a cool video that I just filmed, and I can't wait to show it to you. So basically, I have a ton of stuff that I'm really excited about, but I can't talk about yet. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, then give it a like. If you want to see more, then subscribe to my channel. If you have something you want to recommend to me, then leave a comment. Or if you just want to be nice or give me some nice criticism, please leave it in the comments. Anyway, this is all I have to say for this video. Thanks for watching, and good night to my lovely audience. Isn't that cute? Good night, everyone.